Okay. All right. Hello. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Gonzalez. I'm a career advisor with Creative Careers. And today we're going to talk about how to create a strong portfolio website for different types of applications. You can feel free to unmute yourselves if you have any questions, but we'll have some time at the end for a Q&A. All right, so today we're going to talk about why you need a portfolio website. We'll also go over how to start building your portfolio website, which platforms you can use, what to include on there, what reviewers are looking for. So whether you are applying for a job, an internship, a sponsored program, or any other student programs that require you to have a portfolio website, we'll talk about what they're looking for, some common mistakes, and also tips so that you're avoiding those mistakes. All right. So first, let's talk about why you need a portfolio website. A portfolio website is really important for you to showcase your work. It demonstrates your abilities and creativity, lets others know about who you are and what you create. And a really strong, well-organized, and well-documented portfolio will help you stand out. It provides evidence of your experience, showcases your unique style, makes a lasting impression on potential employers. So it's really an important tool to have in your professional development toolkit. So first and foremost, you will need a portfolio website to apply for internships and student programs. So if you're in the process of applying for internships or jobs, or in the future you want to apply to sponsored programs or the mentorship program, you'll need a portfolio website. It's required. You also need one to appeal to future employers. So it's expected that your work lives somewhere where employers can view it and know the type of work that you're doing. It's also important to build your personal brand as an artist and designer. You want to make sure you're showcasing yourself as a creative professional. And then lastly, it's just a really nice way for you to house your projects and update them as you see fit. Your portfolio evolves with your career, so it showcases your journey, highlights new skills that you've learned, and it can reflect your adaptability in a fast-changing industry. So it's really nice to see all of your projects in one place. It can encourage you to reflect on your growth. And just knowing you have a solid portfolio can also boost your confidence when you're applying for jobs. So it's a nice reminder of your accomplishments and your capabilities. All right, so let's talk about where you can start with building a portfolio website. Can I see thumbs up or show of hands if you have a portfolio website already? Okay, great. So some of you might already have a website. Some of you might be in the process of creating one. Um, if you haven't already started one, or if you're looking to switch platforms, we're going to briefly share a few platforms that are pretty popular and they're more plug and play, so they're pretty easy to use. A lot of these have helpful blogs with information about how to use features that those platforms offer. A lot of them are also free to start. Some of them offer student discounts. For example, Cargo and Adobe, they both are free to Art Center students. Um, you can, of course, start with another platform that's not listed here, but it's just important to pick something that you can reliably update each term. It's really good to have a designed portfolio if that's what you want, but you also want to make sure you have something that is not so complicated that you won't be able to update it regularly. All right. So let's talk more about what to include on your website. These are things you should always include on your website. So if you don't already have them, definitely make sure you add them. The first is your name. This can be your actual name. It can be a studio name, a professional name, a logo, as long as there's some identifiable factor. Um, and if you're actively applying to jobs and internships, you want to make sure that that name matches across all of your application materials. So there's no confusion on the employer's end about when your materials are being reviewed. And then your bio, of course, also known as your About Me page. This allows employers to find out more about who you are and your work. Usually it's a separate page. There is a separate page for this. Sometimes students have this paired with their contact information, which is fine too. You just want to make sure that you're keeping it professional and you don't list any personal details, like your age, for example. And if you choose to include a photo, you want to make sure it's also a professional photo, like something you would use for LinkedIn. And then lastly, of course, you should always include your work. Now, For your work, you want to be intentional about how you display it. It should be the heart of your website. You don't want to make someone have to dig through your website to find your work. So if you're applying for a job or internship or a student program, you want to make sure it's easy to find that information. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to structure each of your projects in one of the later slides. So for your bio, it can be a couple of sentences, it can be a couple of paragraphs. It's really up to you and how much information you want to include, but we do recommend that you touch on a few different points. The first is who you are and where you're located. You also want to mention what you do, what you make, what inspires you, and any unique skill sets or characteristics of your work. And this can all be written in a very brief 1 or 2 sentences. And I will show you all where you can find a resource if you don't already have a bio. And if you do, you can update it if you don't have some of this information. So this is our resource page. And we go through the key points I just mentioned. So who you are, where you're located, what you do, what inspires you, unique skills. And it can be really short. Like Bijou Carmen is an illustrator based in Los Angeles. She graduated with distinction from Art Center College of Design in 2014 with a BFA in illustration. Bijou is inspired by nostalgia, strong women, plants, and a love of print and bright colors. Or it can be a bit longer. Again, it's up to you and how much information you want to include. We also have this downloadable resource, which is a worksheet that you can use to brainstorm what you want to include on here. All right, so let's go back to the slide deck. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's talk more about what you should include on your website. You should also have a contact page. This, again, sometimes students pair with their about me or their bio. You can definitely do that if you want to pair it together. I've also seen this on its own page. We do recommend that you avoid a fillable form. Instead, include your email address or your LinkedIn, any other contact info that you want to include on that page. If you absolutely want to have a fillable form, we recommend that you also have your email somewhere on there and able to be highlighted. That way employers can just copy and paste it into their documents or their email if they want to send you an email at a later date and they don't want to fill out a form. And then you'll also have a domain name, of course, and this is your URL. While you're in school, you might have something with the platform you're using in your URL. So for example, amygonzalez.wix.com. But if you can, we do recommend that you streamline it, your name, so that it looks more professional and it's easier for people to remember your website name and just find your work. And there are some websites that allow you to do this, to only have your name as your URL. And then passwords. If you're in a sponsored program or you were in a sponsored program or you created a project where you signed an NDA and you're not able to, or rather you need to password protect your work, that's completely understandable. However, we do recommend that you never password protect your entire site. Instead, password protect only the projects that you're wanting to put a password on. And if you want recruiters and employers to view those projects that have a password, we recommend that you include it if you're in an email exchange with an employer or a recruiter. Make sure you're providing them with a password so that they can easily access your work. You want to make sure you're not setting up any barriers for yourself, so provide that information in advance. If you are submitting your resume for something and your website should be linked on there, if you have a password on any of your projects, include the password on your resume as well, so that they can easily copy and paste that so that they can view your work as easily as possible. So let's talk about how to format your projects. So first, you want to curate your best and most relevant work. So instead of showing everything you've done, You should carefully select pieces that represent your strongest skills and match the type of clients or jobs that you want to attract. So think about who your viewer is and the work that you want to be doing. And then you should also be providing context for each of your projects. Each project should tell a story. So show the process behind your designs from the initial idea to the final result. You can include short descriptions, sketches, mock-ups, anything to highlight your creative thinking and problem solving. So we recommend for each project have a project name, a description of the project, very brief description. An employer, if they're reviewing lots of applications, they might only have 10 to 15 seconds to look at your project. So you want to make sure they understand it quickly. Have a brief description and then process. So any images, any sketches that are going to show your process. And then you also want to sort it by relevance. So if you're, for example, a transportation designer and you really want to work on exteriors, but you also have experience doing a lot of interior design work, you want to make sure you're leading with projects that showcase your exterior work. If you have lots of different categories of projects, you can include those on there, that's great. But what matters is how you organize them. So you want to make sure that you're organizing your projects in a way that makes it easier for employers to find the examples of work that they're looking for. And I'll show you some examples of what I mean by that at the end of this workshop. I'll show you some examples of portfolio websites. But you do want to make sure you're showcasing the projects that are most relevant for your viewer to see. And then lastly, check your spelling. So I've reviewed a lot of portfolio websites where there are some spelling errors or grammar errors. So you want to make sure you're visiting the writing center so you can double check your work and make sure there are no errors. Okay, let's talk a little bit about design basics. So you should be using fonts and colors that are legible. When in doubt, you can stick to modern sans serif fonts like the examples we have here. It's an easy way to create a really nicely designed and legible website. You can also get creative and use accent fonts that mirror your personal branding, but when in doubt, just keep it simple. And you also want to make sure that your font sizes are able to be read easily. So have at least a 12-point font size and make sure your design doesn't distract from your work. Now, same thing for colors. You want to make sure your colors enhance your portfolio, not distract from it. So you can get creative with that. You can experiment with darker backgrounds like black or gray. But when in doubt, again, you can just use a white background with dark font. It's always a safe bet and it'll still look great. Regardless of what you decide, you want to make sure you're keeping the layout clean and professional. You can think about it as you would for design a project. You want to make sure you're designing it with minimal clutter, consistent styling. So keep it simple. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's talk a bit about what your reviewer is looking for. So whether you're submitting your portfolio for a job, an internship, a sponsored program, or creative careers for the mentorship program, what is your reviewer looking for? One, clarity for what you do. You want to make sure when an employer lands on your website, they can figure out right away what it is that you do. And is it presented in a professional way? So keep in mind, sometimes employers look at, 100 applications, 50 applications for one role. So they're looking at a lot of websites. So you want to make sure that they can easily look at your website and find what they're looking for and understand what the project was. They also want to see consistency. So do you have a few examples of work that shows what you do? And context for each project. So when an employer or your reviewer clicks into each project, do they know what the project entailed? What was your goal? What was your role? Again, they have about 10 to 15 seconds to look at it sometimes. So you want to make sure they're able to find it right away. So have your goals, your challenges, your role listed in there. It can be in your brief description. Just have it somewhere on your project so that it's easy for your reviewers to find that information. And then lastly, they might be looking at your uniqueness. So again, do you share your goals and some of the things that you like to do in your About Me? Do you provide details about who you are? Those are some things they might be looking for. Now let's talk about some common mistakes and what you can do to avoid them. The first is a lot of times portfolio websites or portfolios rather might be submitted in the wrong file format. So you want to make sure that you're reading application instructions carefully so you understand which format to submit. Usually it's websites. A common mistake is that they're, for example, you're applying to a sponsored program, they're submitted in a Google Drive or just not in the format that was requested, which is websites. So you want to make sure you're reading the instructions carefully so you understand which format to submit. And then another issue is that sometimes portfolios are password protected. It's okay if you have a password for projects, but we recommend again that you don't password protect your entire portfolio website. If there's a password to access, you're setting up barriers for yourself, and sometimes the reviewers might not end up going through the trouble of looking at your work because there's no password. And even if it's submitted Google Drive, like a Google Drive folder with a password or a website with a password, it's still an issue. So you want to make sure you're providing the password and submitting the correct file format. Next is that a website is not easy to navigate. So you want to make sure you have appropriate headings for each of the tabs for your work, for your contact information, for your About Me, just so it's easy for employers to find the information that they're looking for. You want to make sure it's easy to navigate, it's clear which projects are in which section, what process belongs to which project. You want to make it as easy as possible for reviewers to take a look at your website. And then lastly, the account is not up to date. So double check your website yourself before submitting it to make sure there are no issues when opening it up. You can send it to a friend, send it to someone from Creative Careers if you're meeting with them for an advising appointment and you want to get an opinion on the structure of your website, how easy it is to navigate, or the content. Um, Send it to someone so that they can also double check that they can open it up on their end and there are no issues when you submit it for a job or any other application. All right, so some tips. You want to make sure you're showcasing the projects that are going to make you stand out for a role. So for example, if you're applying for a character artist role, you want to make sure you're leading with projects that showcase characters, not environments or props. You want to make sure the ones that are relevant or most relevant to the job you're applying for are standing out when your application is reviewed. So if you want, you can have those different categories of work, but you want to make sure you're showcasing the ones that are relevant for that specific job you're applying for. You also want to show your versatility in projects. And there's a way to do that while still being consistent and focused in your work. So for example, if you're a graphic designer, you can display a variety of styles and projects like related to branding, web design, motion graphics. Just make sure that they all align with your personal brand and strengths. Now, also showcase your best work, of course. You want to make sure you're showcasing the work that is going to show what your skill set is, um, what it is that you feel you did really well in, and you want to showcase that work. You can also visit websites to get ideas for how to organize your work. You want to make sure it's easy to read and navigate, so you might get inspiration from viewing other websites and seeing how other artists and designers organize their work. So take a look at how others did it, especially if it's someone maybe that inspires you. Take a look at their website, see how they're organized, their projects. If it's someone that's working with an employer you're interested in working with or holding a role that you're interested in pursuing, look at how they design their websites. Take a look at how Art Center alum design their websites, so you can check out the Gratcho website as well to get some inspiration. And then we also recommend that you update your portfolio every term. That way, your projects are still top of mind. the detail of your process is all still fresh in your mind. You want to make sure you're updating it as you complete those projects that you want to include. And then visit the Writing Center to review your portfolio for any grammar, spelling, or punctuation errors. And lastly, read the application instructions carefully because you want to make sure you're submitting the correct file format. And usually it's going to be a website, not a Google Drive folder. It's most likely going to be a website, but double check you're reading the application instructions to confirm. Any questions before we take a look at some portfolio website examples together? Okay. So these are a couple of websites I wanted to show you all. Let me share my screen. Okay. So you'll see this is the landing page for their website. These are their different categories of work. Let's click into one. There's some context. About me. You'll see there's a description, but also the contact information is here. Sometimes people will also include their resume, so you can include that on there. Just make sure you have it updated, and I recommend that you include it as a PDF rather than a JPEG. That way, again, employers can highlight your information. Let's take a look at the next website. So there's a title, a description, provide some context so that employers can easily understand what it is they're looking at. And then photos of their project. And then at the very bottom, role, skills, and when it was completed. So there's different ways you can do it. And let's go to the About Me, a description, and there's a contact information here. And the CV. Look at one more project, and then we'll take a look at the last website example that I have. And a lot of times I'll see that contact information is added to every page. So you can do it that way too, as well as have it on your About Me or a separate contact page. So it's in a couple of different places. Let's look at the last one. Work, archive, but these are the projects that they highlight. And there is description, and this project is a bit different in how the information is organized, and that's okay too. You might have a preference for maybe scrolling to look at your process or doing it a different way. They have their own resume tab. You can download contact info, sketchbook. So there's other tabs you can include aside from the required content that we talked about. About me. Their resumes here again. So is their contact information. They have a separate contact page here. So it's in a couple of different places. Let's look at one more. You see they use font size to make certain pieces of information stand out. All right, let's go back to the screen. Any questions? Okay, so let's talk about some of our resources. So you can schedule an advising appointment with our team with an advisor and get some feedback on the content of your website and just how everything is organized. We can take a look at your brief descriptions and talk about how we understand your projects to double check that you are conveying what you want to for each project. And then we have our resource page, which you can use to edit your portfolio website or start your portfolio website if you don't already have one. And I'm going to drop this in the chat as well. Oh, 1 second. Okay. So that's our resource page. We go through from the very beginning, picking a platform. We have some information for each of these websites, what to include on your website, which we talked about, how to format your projects, design tips. We have another recorded workshop here. And then I also want to show you the GradShow website, which I will also include in the chat. I recommend taking a look at how alumni organize their website. Some of these profiles might not have a website, so just click through to see which ones you want to look at, and you can look at them by terms here. So if you want to look at 2024 fall, these are the 2024 fall graduates. So you can look through these programs and see how others organized their projects and get inspiration for how you might want to organize yours. And then this is our contact information. So we're located on South Campus now in the 1111 building, room 220, right across from the elevators. We are in person Tuesdays to Thursdays. We work virtually on Mondays and Fridays, and our hours are 8:30 to 4:30. If you have any questions, you can send us an email at careers@artcenter.edu. I'm also going to type my email in the chat if you have any questions after our meeting. You can send me a message. Okay, I am going to stop the recording and then open it up to questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This, I don't know if you'll be able to answer, but I have a website built on Cargo.